Yep, we are recording.
Okay, great. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I hope today will be informative. This is a very relaxed. So don't, if you have a question, please do raise your hand. And, happy to stop and talk about it in the middle. We do have places to talk about, like sections for questions, but you can also stop us at any point. So this is the overview of our workshop. We're quickly just going to introduce ourselves, talk about our values and alignment. Then we will also go through an overview of graduate programs, finances of being able to fund your graduate experience, a to-do list and a timeline, and then reflections and question and answer. Oh, and I believe that Anjali put within the chat, if there are any, there are a link to our worksheets. So this is an active workshop. So there's a worksheet that's in there that we'll be using, and that will also, I think, be helpful for future applications for you all for graduate school. Okay, so my name is Nikki Traylor-Knowles. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Miami and the founder of director of BWEAMS. And I'm also, I just like to include a slide because I'm also a mom of twins. And I've recently started being the director of a special collections director, which is very much not in my training, but it's been interesting to learn how to do that. And I've been now at University of Miami since 2016. So just turned in my tenure package, and I'm really excited because I will hopefully have tenure this time next year. And I just want to give just a very brief educational background to discuss sort of why I would be giving this workshop. So I've been in academics for a very long time. And I've known since I was 9 years old that I wanted to be a professor. So yeah, I was a nerdy 9-year-old. So I started, I did my BS and MS at the Johns Hopkins in cell molecular biology. Then I did a PhD in biology at Boston University, did a postdoc fellow at Stanford, and now I'm at University of Miami. So I've had a very, just like a linear path to my academic position. But all of this, like I said, is just to say that I know a lot of ins and outs about how academics work. And so I, especially now as a PI, understand a lot about getting into grad school. So the workshop today, we wanted to kind of give you all the perspective of a PI, so an advisor, so myself, a professor, versus a student. So Anjali will be talking. So Anjali, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Anjali Boyd. I just completed my first year of my Ph.D. at Duke University. I did not grow up knowing I wanted to be a professor, and I'm still iffy about if that's the route I want to go. But I have kind of recently went through the whole applying to graduate school and still helping actually other undergrads and other grad students do this process. And so I'll just kind of be talking more about the timeline and hopefully be able to give some input about like what it was like for me, things to consider and all of that. But yeah, I've also applied for a bunch of external fellowships so I can answer questions about funding opportunities outside the NSF, because I know everybody kind of knows about that. And there's a lot of other ones that people don't always highlight. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, thanks, Anjali. So one quick thing that I want to say before we jump into this is to remember that as you're going through this process of applying or even thinking about applying to schools, is to talk with your community. So use BWEAMS. Like we have the Slack group. You can always email us too if there's questions. So you have a really rich network of very, very successful women at all different stages. So I just want to remind you of that, because sometimes when we're in this process, we forget that actually other people have either one, gone through this, or two, are currently going through it, or three, want to go through it. So, and we have all that in the group. So just remember that. Okay, so we're going to start with something a little bit more theoretical, I guess, where I want to first reflect on your values. So I want you to first get out the worksheet that we shared. And on the second page, you'll see the start of this worksheet that says, what do you value? And so the idea of this is that I want you to reflect on a positive peak experience that you've had in your life to identify key motivators and themes. So these themes can help you define how you find happiness and contentment in your life's purpose. So why am I talking about this with graduate school? Well, this is a large commitment. And so we want to make sure before we dive into this that your values are aligned with this future goal of going to grad school. So we're going to start by first thinking about, think about a time that you had a positive peak experience. So a peak experience is some experience that really sticks out, right? It could be for many people, like, I don't want to put ideas in your head, so you have to think about this, but I can give you examples. Like a peak experience for some people is traveling for the first time, or being, I don't know, bike riding somewhere, or, you know, submitting a grant. These are really lame examples, but but I'm just trying to think of it's just an experience that is memorable in a positive way. So take a moment to think about that. And in the next part A, just write down, jot down, what was the experience and why does it stand out? And then once you're done with that part, what I want you to fill in is the next part, which are just 5 words that can describe this experience. So, you know, in the case of travel, you know, it could be adventure, excitement, you know, these descriptive words to describe that experience of what you felt. So I'll give you like a couple minutes to think through this, and then we'll come back together, and just, if anybody's willing to share, we can discuss that very quickly. So take a moment to really think about this. Okay, so does somebody want to share what their peak experience was? You just feel free to unmute or raise your hand or whatever. Anybody?
Okay, I can go.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. So for my peak experience, I put that it was when I was living in North Carolina and I was bartending and I was also doing research. I said that it stands out because I was doing everything that I love to do. Oh, I'm sorry, I think my neighbor's speaking to me, but I'll keep going.
And then, no, that's great. And then, so this peak experience is when you're living in North Carolina,
Yes.
doing research and bartending. Now, what were sort of the 5 words that you could describe this experience?
Let's say fun, challenging, relaxing, appreciation, and beauty. So
what was the last one? I'm sorry.
Beauty.
Nice. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for sharing that. That was a great example of how we want to kind of approach these. So she had a specific experience, and then she had these kind of 5 words to describe what that experience was. So we're going to do this again. And I want you to now pick out, go to number 2 and pick out a second peak experience. When I say second, it doesn't have to be like second to that first one. It's just another peak experience that you've had. And again, just write out what the experience was and why you consider it a peak experience. And then, what are the 5 words that describe this experience? So we'll take just another minute to do this. And I should have said this before, don't overthink this. So it doesn't have to be something super grand, right? Peak experiences are very personal. So it can be something very simple, right? It doesn't have to be, I climbed Mount Everest or something. It can be something as simple as submitting a grant, So just keep that in mind to not overthink this in case you're having trouble or feeling stuck on this. So like 1 more minute. And the good thing is you have these worksheets so you can think about this more after the workshop to go into it deeper if you want. Okay, and so now I just want to move on to that third question, which is reflect on these 2 peak experiences that you described above. And so what are 3 things that are common with them? So put on your scientist hat here, and let's just look at this and see, are there any common threads that you see between these 2 peak experiences? And if they are, maybe just write down a word describing the 3. Or 3 words describing the 3 things. Okay, so does somebody want to share what, let's just for the sake of time, kind of come to number 3 about what reflecting on your 2 peak experiences and maybe some of the common threads that you saw between them. Yeah, go ahead, Selma.
Hi. Yeah, for me, it was a little hard. So the only thing I could come up between the two was like a sense of acceptance between them.
Okay.
Um,
And
yeah.
why was it hard? Can you just?
Well, so for my peak experience, one was like getting my undergrad thesis published, and it was my first author publication. And then the second one was spending Ramadan of 2017 with my family back in Egypt. And so I was like, I couldn't figure out anything else that was like common between the two. So I would just put sense of acceptance, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can see that as a thread between the two. So, and this is like, again, this is something to reflect on, right? So it's okay if right now it's like, I'm not quite sure. You'll have these worksheets and you can think about this. But I think that's right on. So sort of a sense of acceptance. So having your manuscript reviewed and accepted into a journal and you know, that is a form of acceptance. You're right. And then being able to be with your family and be, you know, within your culture, you know, I mean, that's an area of just like acceptance and love. So yeah, I can see that totally as a thread. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I just couldn't think of any other two. So if anyone has ideas, let me know, but I'm definitely going to sit and think about that for a little while.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Selma, for sharing.
Yeah.
So, you know, this idea is something actually that I like to do a lot because I think it's really important to align your life with your values so that you make sure that the things you're doing are aligned with the things that you want to do and not what other people want you to do. So this is important and just data. It's information for you to use and to maybe help inform some of your life choices. Okay, and so the next reflective quick exercise that I want to do is called the core why. I don't think we have a worksheet for this, so you can just, you know, jot down on a piece of paper. So my question to you and how this works so you can understand the structure is, if my question is to you, why do you want to go to grad school? And let's say you say, well, because I like dolphins. So then the next question is, well, why do you like dolphins? And you say, well, I find marine mammals really interesting. And I'm really excited about learning about the evolution of intelligence, social intelligence. And so then you ask, well, why do you want to learn about the evolution of social intelligence? And you say, well, because when I was a kid, I was always really fascinated by why some kids in my class were really smart and some were not. I mean, I don't know, that's a bad example, but like the point is that it gets to this core idea that went from, I want to study dolphins to this idea that was maybe something as a kid you formed, or an idea that maybe came out, you know, somewhere in your you know, growing up. So it's kind of gets more to the core reason of why. So I want you all to try this. So ask yourself, why do you want to go to grad school? And then whatever that answer is, then ask why. And then whatever that answer is, ask why. And from there, we'll get to our core answer. So just take a couple minutes and we'll come back together and discuss this. Okay, so would someone mind sharing their kind of process through this, starting with that second part of why you want to go to grad school and through? This is a non-judgmental space.
Your mom.
Okay.
So when I asked myself this, why I wanted to go to grad school, the first answer was because my parents always kind of told us that getting an advanced degree was going to be valuable. When I asked why that was, it was because they wanted us to not be limited in people's imagination. They were raising Black kids. So of course that. And so for me, it boiled down to wanting the freedom. I understood that getting an advanced degree came with a certain level of people viewing you as some expert, which then would give me freedom in my future career and be able to make certain decisions, and not necessarily be pigeonholed into something that I don't necessarily want to do. So
nice.
That was mine.
That's really good. That was great, Anjali. That was a great example. Much better than my dolphin example. I'm tired. It's been a long week. So does anyone else want to share?
I can share mine.
Okay.
So I want to go to grad school because I love the beach and I love oceans. And why I love that is because I went to the Caribbean every Christmas with my family, and snorkeling and being near the ocean, I just grew an appreciation for it. So I love to learn how to protect it and keep it for future generations.
Okay, but now why do you want to protect it for future generations?
That's a good question.
That's the next
yeah, that's a hard one.
Keep it there. Because that's going to be the core.
Right. I think it's just a sense of beauty, and also there's a purpose. The ocean is there, there's a reason, and I want to make sure the earth is okay. That's a hard one. I'll have to sit on that, but it's somewhere in there.
Yeah. But that's the core, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that next kind of deeper level answer is actually the value core in you for why you are motivated to go to graduate school. So that was good. So I hope you all are seeing that this gets to this very deeper level very quickly by just asking these three whys. So again, this is another way to kind of make sure that your values are aligning, and to be able to make sure that your motivations are in line with what with the reason you want to go to grad school. So why are we doing all this reflective stuff? We're here to tell you about how to get into grad school. It is because grad school is a lot, and it's not something to do if you're really not fully committed. And you want to make sure that when times get tough, you know what your inner drive is, because times will get tough. It's awesome, but there's also challenges. And so if you're motivated by the right place, that can help drive you. And then depending on the program that you might apply for the different types of program, it could cost you money. So again, you want to make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons. So I hope these tools of using and asking the why, and also reflecting on your values, can be good things to come back to. And at the bottom of the worksheet, at the bottom of page, which page is this? Page 3, you're going to see that it has then leading into linking your values with your career aims. And so that's an important thing to think about. Again, we don't have time to do it today, but it's something to do on your own as you're thinking about and going through these peak experiences, what it is in those experiences that you want to get out of your career. right? Because ultimately grad school is training you for a career. So you want to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. Okay. So I'm going to shift gears now and get into just information. All the information that Anjali and I are going to be sharing are based on your registrations and what you shared with us as wanting to know. So thank you for filling those in, because that really helped us guide what we were going to tell you. So an overview of graduate programs. Okay, so there's several different types of graduate programs, and this is based in the US. So I'm going to be talking from a US perspective because that's what I know, but I will at the end just discuss briefly considerations for international students if they want to study in the US. So there are PhDs, Masters of Science, professional masters, and then there's other professional degrees, right? Like MD or the veterinary degree. The length of time for a PhD is typically 5 to 8 years, but the average would be 6. And the commitment, the monetary commitment, is that you get paid a stipend and insurance and tuition. Your school or your advisor should pay for all of that. You should not pay for a PhD. I cannot emphasize that enough. If someone is trying to make you pay for a PhD, you run, okay? That's not the program you want to be in. Now, a master's is different because typically it is self-paid. Not always, depends on the university, but for Research 1 universities, like University of Miami, most masters are self-paid. They typically last 2 or 3 years, but there are, even though they are self-paid, there can be scholarships and fellowships. It just depends on the program. Then there's professional masters. These typically last 2 years, and it's the same as above, where it is, it costs money and you typically have to pay it or find some sort of scholarship. Now, we'll talk about the difference between the Masters of Science and a professional master's in a second. But I just wanted to also compare this to other professional degrees, because maybe you're considering, like, you want to go to vet school or even go to med school. So those can be anywhere from 5 to even longer than 10 years, because there's a lot of different training that is involved, right? Some of that training you might get paid for, some of it you have to pay. But it is very expensive. So a lot of medical doctors do have to take out, or pre-med or medicine students have to take out a lot of loans and whatnot to actually pay for that schooling. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're exploring what you want to do. And so I have this kind of crazy decision tree, because I think this is sort of an important aspect to think about. So you're going to start in the green box that says undergrad degree. And the question is, are you sure you know what you want to do? So it's yes or no. So take a moment to kind of follow through this and see where you land. And then let's just talk very briefly about it, and I'll go through some of the portions of this in a second. So just take like 30 seconds to look through this. Okay, so did anybody land maybe in a spot at the end into the light blue squares? Did anybody land into a square that maybe you didn't expect? Yeah, okay. Brianna did.
I kind of ended up in the more investigation is needed, maybe.
Okay.
Like, I don't know if, like, I know what I want, but I know that there are multiple paths to doing it ultimately. And like, yes, you can get a PhD and it can help you, but you can also not even go to graduate school, I think. And so because it's like a more innovative, like it's like more biotech aligned and like biology.
Mhm.
So, you know, it can go either way. Like you can,
Yeah. So good. So this is good information, right? So this is information for you to take in and say, okay, well, you know, if I don't know if I like troubleshooting and research, you know, like I'm not quite sure if that's actually what I want to do. Let me do some more investigation, because ultimately in a PhD, that is what you're going to spend most of your time doing. is doing some sort of research, whatever your specialty is, and troubleshooting. And so you want to make sure that you're aware of that, so that when you're making this decision, you're okay with that. And if that's something where you're like, I hate troubleshooting, I do not want to do that, then that's where maybe going back to consider and talk with your community, with an advisor, with a mentor, or someone that maybe has the job that you want, to see like, how did they get there? And maybe they can help you. And they say, well, actually, to get my job, you have to get a PhD. Then it's like, okay, I know I got to do this. But if they said, actually, you can get a master's and get this job really soon, and you'd be able to, you know, start working and making good money right away. So these are things to kind of consider with this. So again, we'll share these slides and you can kind of use this. But the other thing that I want to bring up is that if you said no, so are you sure that you know what you want to do? And you said no. And so you ended up and you said, do you like doing research and troubleshooting? And you said no. Then I had this sort of consider applying to a professional master's. Reason being, a professional master's is more of a applied master's. So it's a master's that is made for you to get job experience. A master's of science is almost like a PhD light, because you're going to do a thesis, you're going to do research, but it's condensed, right? And so many people do that as a launching point to go into a career of research, or they use it as a launching point to go into a PhD and then eventually into a career of research or something related. So that's kind of the difference between those two. And I'm happy to talk more about that later if folks have further questions on that. In terms of finding a program, so, you know, first and foremost, it's internet searches. So it's not anything that's super complicated, just doing a good word search. It's also talking with mentors or advisors or the BWEAMS community. You can also go to conferences or networking events. And if you're constrained to a region, then you're going to have to identify the best programs within that region. So let's say you have a family and you're like, I can't move out of Florida. Like, I need to stay in Florida, preferably in Miami. So, you know, that's really going to narrow down the programs that I can apply to versus if you could live anywhere in the world, right? So these are just things to kind of consider in your initial search. And then what is the best program? And I have the term best in quotes because best is really whatever is going to be best for you. So it's going to depend on what your needs are. What do you want? And can this program make it happen? Does the school have to be an Ivy League? No, it doesn't. What is more important is to choose by the advisor and the fit of the program. So if it's at an Ivy League, awesome, but it doesn't have to be that. So I just like to say that because sometimes graduate school versus undergrad, where maybe in undergrad, you're really shooting for the best school you can get into. But for graduate school, you're essentially doing you're going to be someone's mentee, right? So you want to make sure that you can work with them, and they might be at Harvard or they might be at University of Miami, right? So the school doesn't matter so much as if you can get the resources that you need and you have a good advisor. And then there's this idea of kind of narrowing your research interests. So the reason I put this in is because as a PI, I get a lot of emails from students that are interested in working in my lab. And a lot of times I can tell that they have not at all thought about what they're interested in. They're just maybe interested in corals. Okay, cool. That's something that's better, but that they haven't at all investigated what I actually do, right, with corals. So they might write me and say, I want to do a field expedition to the Bahamas and do all this stuff. And it's like, that's awesome, but my lab doesn't do that. So, you know, that you wouldn't be probably a good fit for my laboratory. Whereas if I get people who I know have looked at the lab, looked at our website and kind of understand what we do, then I'm more inclined to start a conversation. So it starts with a Google search. So in this example, I put in corals research in California, right? And then you're going to get a lot of schools will come up, right? And then you can just start investigating the programs. So I believe we shared a template of this. Did we, Anjali? Yeah. That, you know, you can use to kind of keep track of your search, which is really important. And so after you start to investigate, you need to really reflect on, what do you want to do? You don't have to know everything, but just generally, it's like, do I want to do more field work? Do I want to be in the water all the time, for example? Or am I okay with doing more lab work or computational work? So things just generally understanding, like, this is what I hope to learn. And then also reflect on what you don't want to do. So if you know for sure that you do not want to do anything that has to do with going in water, fine, that's great. You just need to know that so that you don't get into a program that's all based on doing scuba diving, for example, right? And then you're going to want to construct a meaningful and succinct email to this potential advisor. And Anjali has provided a really great template that she came up with for when she was applying for schools, which you're welcome to modify and use for your search. Okay, lastly are finances. So how do PhD finances work? So what do I mean by this? I mean your financing. So how do you survive in getting your PhD? Because when you're hired as a PhD student, you will either be paid by teaching, being a research assistant, having a fellowship, or a blend of these. So you might teach 1 year and then have a research assistantship 1 year, and then maybe you got an NSF and have a fellowship another year, right? So the difference in these are kind of the expectation of what you need to do in your day-to-day. So if you have to teach, you're going to get paid for literally teaching courses at your university. Usually it's like a discussion section or something of that nature. I'm sure all of you in your undergrad experience have had a TA, a teaching assistant, a graduate student that has taught you. So you'd be doing that while also working on your research and also taking classes. So it's a lot. As a research assistant, this is typically money that your advisor got in a grant, and they're going to pay you to do research and to do, you know, and pay for your tuition and all of that. A fellowship tends to be something that you got. So you got the NSF, GRFP, or the Ford Fellowship, or whatever. It's your own scholarship that you got, outside money. And then, like I said, a blend of these. So typically it is a blend of these. So I know for myself, I had to do a lot of teaching during my graduate program, but then I also was able to get a research assistantship and a fellowship here, you know, so it kind of cobbled it all together. But this is an important note that when you're interviewing, to find out how you're going to be funded, because if you're going to be teaching a lot, it's something to keep in mind that it's like, it's gonna make your ability to complete your degree, it's gonna take a little longer. It's just the reality of it. If you have to teach every semester while also doing research, you know, instead of taking 5 years, it might take you 6 or 7 years. So just understand that. Not always, but it can for many. And yeah, so again, good question to ask when you're interviewing. Also, the other question, and I'm sorry if there's questions in the chat, I haven't been able to keep up with them. So I don't know, Anjali, if you'd be able to, okay, she's got it. So finances for masters in science. So like I mentioned, many of them are self-paid. So you pay your tuition fees and living expenses. So you can already imagine how much that could be, right? And so many times people will be doing a master's and working. It's a lot. So that's why you want to consider, if you're going to do a master's, that either one, you're sure that that's sort of maybe the end goal, that that's what you need. You don't necessarily need a PhD. Or two, if you're really unsure of what you want to do, but you know you like learning and you like school, maybe consider it. But it is something to really think about, because it is a lot of money, okay? Some programs will have teaching assistantships for master's students, research assistantships, fellowships, or a blend of these. But many times it is self-paid. And I just have this note that it does depend on the institution, and some are master serving institutions. So I just put this example of UNC Wilmington, while a lot of them are not. So for example, isn't. So most master students have to pay out of pocket. But many master serving institutions do have usually options. So it's just something to think about and consider. And there are scholarships too out there that aren't connected to a university that you can apply for. And then just international student considerations. So if you're going to be applying for a US school, then you really have to make sure that you check out. Most universities have these international graduate student services, or have a graduate student services office, something of a similar name like that. And they're going to be able to help you with that paperwork. And generally what you need to get is an F1 visa and an I-20 form that's endorsed by the university. And there's probably a lot of other paperwork that's also involved with this.